Everybody gone. Here we go. And welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Lisa Decker, a certified divorce financial analyst and founder of Divorce Money Matters and DivorceTown USA. And we're really excited today because we have some top experts in the matters of divorce and real estate who are going to share some really important information that we want you to know so that we can help you avoid common, costly, and permanent disasters that can happen when it comes to divorce and real estate. So today we have with us our great experts here. There we go. Can see everyone's faces. I'm not sure if my screen is showing the same as yours, but next to me to my right is Pam Evans. And Pam, if you want to wave to everyone, I'm going to give you their bios as they come up and we get started here. Next to Pam is Mike Congemi, and Mike's going to be talking about appraisal matters. Pam's going to be talking about real estate matters. And then down below me here is my wonderful assistant, Marcella Kripe. She might peek in and give us a wave. There we go. And next to Marcella is Tony Scarparo, and he's going to be talking about mortgage matters today. So we've got some really good content for you today. This is one of my favorite topics. I'm also a real estate collaboration specialist in divorce, and I have to tell you, this is where we see a lot of mistakes made. So you're going to get some great stuff. So I'm going to jump right into it here, and Mike's going to go first. Mike Congemi has been a certified residential appraiser in Georgia since 2006. He is also a real estate collaboration specialist in divorce. And at the Appraisal Institute, he is a candidate for designation. He will talk to us today about the importance of knowing the true value of your home and why a certified appraisal is crucial to the process. And so I have to say that, you know, when I'm working with divorcing clients, many times we're not sure what the market value is. There may be some differences of opinion. The market may be changing rapidly, and there may have been improvements, or there may have to the home, or there may have been downslide in the area. We are not really sure. So the best way to get a handle on that is to get a certified appraisal. So Mike, happy to have you here, and we're going to give you the screen now and tell us more about what folks need to know, and also how best to handle the situation in the middle of COVID. I know you've got some really unique tools that can help people with getting an appraisal and not having to enter the home. And before we get started, I do want to say one thing. Marcella may be putting poll questions up. There may be other things going on. So Marcella, do you have any poll questions for us before we get started here so folks will know about that?
We do not have any poll questions today. However, we do want to remind everyone to please use the chat box freely for questions, because when we're done at the end of everyone's presentation, we will get to as many questions as we can. So please feel free to use that at your discretion, and I'll be monitoring that as we go along.
Great, thank you. And so I also want to mention that you'll be able to get the information for each of the folks will be posted in the chat box, a link to where to find them on DivorceTownUSA.com. And so Mike, go ahead and get us started here.
Sure, my name is Mike Congemi. I'm thrilled to be here to talk about this very important topic about why to get an appraisal. And also we're going to talk a little about state of the real estate market in Atlanta in particular, and talk about some macroeconomic issues. So I'll go ahead and start the presentation. We're going to touch on three topics today. Why to get an appraisal, different report options, and like I said, just an update on the state of the real estate market. At first, in talking about why to get an appraisal, I'd like to speak about different alternatives to appraisals that people may use in divorcing matters to come up with their home value, and why, you know, the different strengths and what they may have in the way of pitfalls or whatever. So I've listed 4 common types. 1 would be the guess the value, 2 to use the tax records, 3 would be online sources. Zillow probably being the most popular, but there's Redfin and some others. And the other one is BPO from a real estate agent. First, we'll discuss guessing the value. What you have here is, what's the basis for your methodology to guess the value? How do you limit bias in this situation? And what are your sources for information? How reliable, how credible are your sources? Next, we'll talk about tax records. Tax records use completely different methodology than typical fee appraisers myself. The tax assessor uses what's called a mass appraisal technique, where they look at all the homes and structures in a general area and kind of compare the sizes and come up with a value. Oftentimes, tax assessments are either under or overvalue based on the market. And since assessments are typically in 3-year time increments, they can drastically lag the market. And also, many counties use heated area for the square footage of the home, not the ANSI GLA standard. ANSI is the standard that appraisers generally use to measure the gross living area of the house. Basically, what the typical GLA is any area that's above grade. Basements are not considered part of gross living area, including finished area, but they are considered in a value. We'll discuss that a little bit later. And values with tax assessors are based on what they define as the tax neighborhoods, not markets typically buyers consider. An example of this, I was actually doing a tax appeal in Ansley Park neighborhood not long ago, and Fulton County actually had Ansley Park neighborhood divided into 2 different tax neighborhoods. And so from a tax appeal standpoint, it made it quite challenging to come up with comparables in that situation. And also, the tax assessor, for the most part, has no idea of the interior condition of your house. Online sources. Some people use, go to Zillow or Redfin or whatever, but you really don't know what the basis of their methodology that they use to come up with the value. You don't know how the gross living area was computed or figured. Did it include the basement area, not include the finished basement? You don't really know. Some sources, Zillow in particular, can be manipulated by the owner or surrounding owners. Particularly with Zillow, you can log in and claim your property. You can add attributes and things that are maybe there or not there. I've seen sales attributed to properties that really didn't happen. They weren't recorded in the tax records. And if your property is manipulated or your neighbors, that can drastically inflate or deflate your values. And again, these online sources generally do not account for interior condition, whether you've done a lot of upgrades or maybe you have some items of deferred maintenance. Another alternative is a BPO from a real estate agent. Generally, these are done by a real estate agent with the hope of getting a listing. Okay, this is different than doing an appraisal for a divorce situation where the intended use of the appraisal is specifically for dividing up the marital assets. Also, typically the real estate agent has a fiduciary and ethical responsibility to the seller to get the highest price. As we'll see in appraisal, it has to be an unbiased opinion. So there is some difference there. Again, there may be questions about how the gross living area was determined and what methodology was used for the adjustments done during the BPO. Okay. So now we get to the point, we've seen some options in appraisal. Now we're going to talk about why get an appraisal. Number one, it's unbiased in opinion. Almost without question, an appraisal will be accepted by a court or mediator. There's no methodology and procedures to an appraisal. With an appraisal, there's three approaches to value. There's a sales comparison, which is the most common, where you compare similar sales in the neighborhood. There's also the cost approach, which looks at the cost to rebuild, what it would cost to build a similar structure. And there's also the income approach. If it's an income producing property, this approach may be developed. And at least one of these approaches needs to be developed in the appraisal. It could be two approaches or all three. And a combination of those will usually determine the final value. Also, the appraisal has a single intended use. Some people going through divorces may think, hey, I just had the house refinanced, I'll use that appraisal. Well, one thing is, an appraisal in a mortgage transaction is basically for the benefit of the lender to analyze their risk in loaning on that property and what exposure they have in risk to that property. The other thing is appraisal for a mortgage transaction, purchase or refinance, is done on a form for Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, and it has language all over it that's specifically for mortgage-related transaction, so thus would not apply in a divorce situation. Then every year when I renew my license, I have to swear an oath to protect the public trust, which is something that the tax records don't do, online sources don't do, and just guessing doesn't do. And also the key thing to appraisal report is credibility. Many people think the key thing is the number. I mean, the value is essential to a property. Don't misunderstand me. But you could have the right value or value that's close. Shouldn't say right, but you could have a value that's reasonable, but you may not have a credible report. You've misreported information. There's significant errors in the report and so on. So credibility is just as important as the final value. Moving on, how to choose an appraiser. There's three levels of appraisal licenses in Georgia. There's a trainee level, there's a license level, and there's a certified level. The trainee level, actually a trainee could do appraisals for divorces, but they're generally fairly new to the profession and don't have the experience. As a certified residential, to get to that license level, I have over 2,500 hours just to be able to sit for that exam and so forth. Where a trainee, basically they take 90 hours of classes and they can sit for the exam and they've got their trainee's license and they can be out doing appraisals. Although with the first 1,000 hours, they have to have a mentor. But as certified residential, I have over 2,500 hours experience just to be able to sit for the exam, plus over 200 hours of classroom. It should be somebody that's experienced with divorce and non-lending assignments. A lot of appraisers, they build their business on lending assignments, which is fine, but non-lending and divorce is a different animal, requires more thorough analysis. My business, we focused on non-lending. Approximately 80% of my assignments are non-lending. I do have one large client that I do nationwide technical reviews for. My lending work probably accounts for less than 10% of my assignments. They should belong to a professional organization. I belong to the Appraisal Institute, which is international in scope, and every 5 years, I actually have to take an ethics class, in addition to some other continuing education beyond what typical appraisers take. Like Lisa mentioned, I'm RSCSD. specialist. And also, it should be an appraiser who's willing to take time to explain the process. They're just not going to send you the report, and they're not going to, if you have questions, you want somebody there who's going to explain the report to you if you have questions, or just explain the whole process in general. Moving on to different types of report options. First one is there's a general full appraisal, which most people are familiar with, where an appraiser comes out to your house and takes some measurements and pictures, the inside and outside. That's most common. It's probably most thorough in that, and it's generally a summary or appraisal report. There's also a review appraisal where we can review an existing appraisal to see the credibility of it, were the best comps used, was the value reasonable in that. The next three options are all what are called restricted reports, where we rely on some of the data from sources, and we may not visit the property. That would be the exterior only in the desktop appraisal, where we may rely on data for square footage and condition from tax records or other private databases, MLS systems, or owners or occupants of the property. Then during the COVID time, I've developed an enhanced desktop or enhanced exterior only, where I can send a link to an app that you can put on your tablet or phone, and the occupant would actually take pictures of the property and send them back to me. And these pictures are geocoded, which we'll see on this slide here. And this is one way I can verify that the pictures were taken of the actual property in that. And so this has been very helpful during this time of COVID, where I don't have to risk my health or the health of the occupant, or if there's situations where the occupant may be have a health, may be compromised health-wise, that somebody strange doesn't have to come into their house, and that they can take the pictures from the comfort of their house. And if I have questions, I can ask them. The next slide is actually a link. I think Marcella said she would email this slide out to the participants, where you can actually watch a video about this whole application and that. It's about a 5-minute video. I don't want to take the time here, but that kind of goes over the part of the enhanced desktop and exterior appraisal about the pictures of the interior of the property. Next, I want to talk about the state of the Atlanta real estate market. This information is based on FMLS, or First Multiple Listing Service, which is one of the two listing services in the Atlanta area. Okay. In general, prices are up about 4.5% from last year. These stats are from as of June, end of June. They don't have July out because we're still got another day to go in July, and they'll probably be out early next week. But as of end of June, prices up are about 4.5% over last year. Now, some markets have been up more. I live in West Cobb in the Harrison High School district, and I can tell you in that area, things are up about 9 to 10%. In the Alpharetta area, I've seen 9 to 10%. Parts of Cherokee County, just east of 75, I've seen things pretty much stable. So is everything in real estate, location is everything. But in general, things are up, are moving up in that. Days on market, that's DOM, pretty much the same. 18 to 19 versus, it was 18 days a year ago, about 19 days today. Number of sales are down from about 15% from a year ago. And also in relation to that, the supply is at 2.6 months versus 3.3 months from a year ago. And this correlates with me speaking with several agents, as I do in a normal course of business, that there is a great lack of listings in the market. And this is what's driving seems to be driving the prices up. You know.
Hey, Mike,
Yeah.
I have a question for you. I just wanted to say, you know, we do have folks here from other areas of the country. Are
Okay.
you seeing this same trend, or is it really just dependent on where you are?
I'm seeing the same trend in many areas of the country. I would say in general, and this is very broad strokes because like I said, in each metropolitan area, you can have many different things going on. But in general, things are at least stable. In some areas are even increasing more. In the Seattle area, that area seems to be increasing more.
What is
Things
Seattle?
around Denver area seem to be continuing to go up even more than the Atlanta area.
Okay, all right.
Uh,
Well, this is
and-
great information you've got here.
Okay.
And I know you've got a gift for folks. Marcella said she's going to send that out, or Marcella put a link in the chat. Somehow we're going to get that information to folks. And are we winding down here? Because I don't want to run out of time for
I understand. Just one last slide.
Okay.
Okay. These are some things to watch because as prices go up, people get excited, like, you know, how long is this going to last and all that. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know how long it's going to last. Okay. But these are items, these are macroeconomic items I would keep an eye on. You know, how long does this high unemployment last? I mean, currently, I believe it's around 11%. You know, when people are out of work, they can't borrow money to buy cars, buy houses, and kind of and tied into this as well. You know, there was a moratorium on evictions that's supposed to expire tomorrow, and that could put, you know, several million people, you know, start several million evictions throughout the U.S. So, you know, obviously, if they've been evicted, they haven't paid their rent. So, if they haven't paid their rent, their chances of borrowing money are even slimmer. Also, during the COVID thing, many lenders have cut back on home equity lines of credit products, and so, you know, do lenders start to bring these back? And this other statistic I got from a real estate podcast that comes out every day. You know, basically at this point, 30% of mortgages are being paid short every month. So in essence, if you got $1,000 mortgage payment, the stat was basically, you know, 30% of those mortgages, people are going to a lender and say, "Hey, I've only got $700 or $800 this month. Will you take it?" You know, that's a you know, large percentage being paid short. Also, there's over 4 million mortgages nationwide in forbearance, which is approximately 8% of all the mortgages. In this forbearance period, this is more in forbearance than there was at the height of the housing crisis in 2008. So this forbearance period is probably going to end, you know, first, maybe second quarter next year. So what happens? Do these people start making their payments again, or are they going to go into foreclosure? You know, a lot depends probably if they can get jobs back or whatever. I've talked to some loan officers that said they have customers who can make their mortgage payments, but they're putting their mortgages in forbearance, which I don't quite understand that because, not to get out of my lane, but, you know, having a mortgage in forbearance can affect future lending. So a key thing is going to be to watch what happens with these items and other macro issues come March to May next year.
Wow.
So I mean, if you get an appraisal today and you're still, you know, and you're divorcing and things don't finalize till, you know, end of first quarter, beginning second quarter next year, you might want to relook at the market, you know, see what it's doing.
Absolutely.
And here's my contact information. I'll be happy to answer any questions later on, or if you want to contact me offline, feel free.
Thank you, Mike. That was great.
I hope I didn't run over time, but, you know.
Well, we're going to have to keep moving here, but this was great information. Thank you. And it gives people a lot to think about as you're going through divorce, as you're trying to figure out what are the values now. If you wait to divorce later, what are the values going to be then? So it's always best to speak with an expert. And next up, we have Tony Scarparo. And Tony has been in the mortgage business for 22 years. After getting divorced himself 10 years ago, he saw firsthand the mistakes that many homeowners make when it comes to real estate and mortgages and credit when they go through a divorce. For the last 6 years now, he has made a focus on helping others that are facing the same challenge and is able to guide them as a certified divorce lending professional. As a CDLP, he has extensive knowledge around mortgage lending guidelines that specifically pertain to divorce. So Tony, welcome to the webinar.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. Thank you for having me. Let me pull up my information that I want to share with you guys today. What I want to show you guys and share today is really the 5 most common mistakes that we see made when people are divorcing and they're dividing up real estate and mortgages in the midst of their divorce. And I want to talk to you about what you need to know so that you can avoid these common mistakes. So first off, and this is in really no particular order, these are all very, very big mistakes that can be made and can be avoided with the right steps. So whichever mistake this is, if it's made by you, it's the biggest one for you. So again, these are in no particular order, but one of the biggest things that we see happen is where a couple is, maybe they're amicable, they're going through a divorce and things are, between them, and they decide that the one that is not going to be staying in the home, that the other spouse is going to just simply give that marital home to the ex-spouse by simply signing a quitclaim deed, instead of actually going through the process of refinancing the mortgage and signing a quitclaim deed. Where this is a big mistake, what happens is the one that has signed the quitclaim deed and has left the home, they are not just simply, released from that mortgage. So the mortgage is still going to stay on that person's credit. And we see this come to haunt that person years down the road, where maybe the spouse that was awarded the home, they had all intents and purposes to continue making those payments on time, but something happened. Maybe they lost their job or became ill. Something happened. They weren't able to make those payments. Potentially they had late payments on the mortgage, or worst case, the property goes into foreclosure or is included into a bankruptcy. And so the spouse that just signed the quitclaim deed, that is now going to negatively impact their credit. The other thing that happens is when that person that gave the house with a quitclaim deed, if they go now to try and qualify for a mortgage, their debt to income ratio is going to be greatly impacted, because they're still showing that mortgage on their credit report, even though the other person is the one that's supposed to be paying it. One of the biggest misconceptions that we see a lot of people make is thinking that because the divorce agreement, the settlement agreement itself, might state that the person that's being awarded the home is the one financially obligated to pay it. And even though that's written into the settlement agreement and the judge has signed off on that, again, that doesn't legally take away their obligation that they signed a mortgage note with whoever that lender was, Chase, Wells Fargo, whoever the bank or mortgage lender was. It doesn't supersede that mortgage note that was signed years before that potential divorce. So again, it is a huge, huge mistake to just simply sign a quitclaim deed and think that that's going to remove any obligation that you have on that home. Number 2, we see people placing a deadline to refinance the marital home too quickly after the divorce. Sometimes we'll see that it says within 30 days or 60 days, or maybe as much as 3 months or longer, that the person being awarded the home needs to refinance it to take the spouse off. While all that is good and important to do, where it becomes an issue is if the one that is being awarded the home is also going to be awarded child support or potentially alimony. One of the things as lenders that we have to look at is proof of receipt of that income. And on most all loan products out there, the lender is going to want to see at least the most recent 6 months worth of receipt of that income. So For the homeowner that's going to be retaining the home, if they need that income of child support or alimony included into their overall qualified income, if the divorce settlement agreement states that they need to refinance prior to 6 months, it's going to be nearly impossible with most standard loan products because they haven't received that income for long enough. So that needs to really be looked at very, very closely. Number three, when using alimony for income in qualifying for a mortgage and not knowing how long it needs to continue for it to be acceptable. So again, this is something with alimony or child support, we see this very often. And unfortunately, we see it happen after the divorce and people have come to us for a refinance. With child support, there's really no way around it. But with alimony, either of these income streams has to be able to continue for at least 36 months for that lender to actually include it as qualified income. So with child support, obviously, if you've got a child that's 15 or 16 years old and the divorce agreement states that it's going to continue until they graduate or until they're 18, which is most common, you're not going to have enough child support continuance for that. And there's really no way around it. With alimony, on the other hand, there's ways that if we're involved with the attorneys or with somebody like Lisa, with a financial advisor, we can look at ways to stretch those numbers out further so that the one that's going to be retaining that home and refinancing, they're going to have enough time of that income continuing for it to actually be a qualified income. And then next, not understanding the difference between an equity buyout versus a cash out refinance. This is a huge, huge mistake that we see made not only by attorneys and homeowners, but also we see this quite often with lenders that are not as well versed in working with divorce cases. I can't tell you how many times we get somebody that's come to us after a divorce, they've gone online just to a general type of a mortgage lender, and they're being told that they need to structure their loan as a cash out refinance, and maybe they don't have enough equity. Basically, the difference between these two is that in an equity buyout, it has to be specified in the divorce agreement, in the language, for the one that's the departing spouse, if they're going to be getting a certain amount of money from the equity that house has grown or the value of the house has grown. It needs to be spelled out very clearly. Ex-husband is going to be awarded, say $50,000, whatever that number is. It has to be very specific. And then when it's being treated that way, the one that's retaining the home and we're doing a refinance, we can actually treat that as what's called an equity buyout. And it's the same as when you're doing what's called a rate and term refinance, meaning the interest rate is going to be much, much better than a cash out refinance. And also the maximum amount that you can borrow on the home as far as your loan to value on most products, you're going to be able to go as high as 95% of what the property is worth, potentially more than that, depending on the loan product. Versus on a cash out refinance, you can only go to 80% of what the home is worth. So there's a big difference there when you're trying to tap into that equity, not only from how much you can get out to pay the ex-spouse, but also how that's going to greatly impact the interest rate that person's going to get in a refinance. And the other caveat to doing it as an equity buyout is that the one refinancing and keeping the home, they cannot get any cash out of that transaction into their own hands. So it has to specifically be done in a way to do that for the ex-spouse. But that's a very important one, and we see this every day get misconstrued. The other one, this one we see all the time between attorneys and also lenders. This is one of the biggest ones that we see a lot of confusion around, is not understanding the difference between alimony and spousal support or maintenance. And while the overall definition of all these is virtually the same, what we see happening more and more often these days is in the settlement agreements, it's become more common to see it listed as either spousal support or maintenance instead of alimony. Where this becomes an issue is with conventional guidelines that are set by either Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, or also guidelines set from FHA, these are the entities that are basically writing the guidelines that all lenders are going to adhere to. And where we see this become an issue is either in the departing spouse when they go to try and refinance, or if they're trying to purchase a new property, when it's counted as alimony, they actually calculate it into the debt to income ratios different than how spousal support or maintenance is calculated. So to give you an example of this, when we calculate the debt to income ratio under the first option here, it's on the left, let's just say, for example, if somebody has $3,500 worth of total monthly obligations, and that could be car loans, credit cards, student loans, and maybe including what that new mortgage payment is going to be. Now, if they have it written that they also are going to be paying spousal support or maintenance, and let's just say in this example, that's $2,000 a month. So they've got now a total of $5,500 in monthly obligations. And in this example, let's just say that this borrower is making $10,000 a month in income. Well, if it is structured in this way, in this calculation, their debt to income ratio is 55%, and they're not going to qualify for a mortgage at that high of a debt to income ratio. Versus on the other side, we've got, say, the same $3,500 in monthly obligations, but the calculation is different. Instead of adding the $2,000 a month in alimony, you actually subtract it from the income number. So now you're dividing $3,500 in monthly obligations into an $8,000 net monthly income, which gives you a 43.75 debt to income ratio, which would qualify for financing. So it's very important to understand that in the differences of how that can impact somebody. In this scenario, it's going to be much more impactful for the one that is paying the alimony or child support in what they're going to qualify or not qualify for in the future. And so one of the ways around this is some sample verbiage that can be used in a settlement agreement. I need to mention, I'm not an attorney, so I'm not giving legal advice here, but working with my clients and working as a team with their attorney, I'm able to provide, some sample language like this that the attorneys can then, write up in what sort of legal terms that they see fit for that settlement agreement, as long as we all know like what we're all shooting for and how this is going to impact either party in the future. How you can avoid these common mistakes that we see every day in our industry is, number one, speak with a lender sooner than later. One of the biggest things that I see people do is, I obviously understand the stress that people go through, and certain times, people going through a divorce, they don't want to have all these conversations. They just want to, bury their head in the sand and hope that it all goes away somehow. And sometimes we see people that, have the conception that maybe their credit and income and all that's perfect, and they're not going to have issues getting financing down the road, but they haven't looked at all these things of how it's going to occur after the divorce. So speaking with a lender, even while you're in the middle of a divorce, is 10 times greater than if you wait until the divorce is done and then trying to unravel all these issues later. Number two, working with a team approach, being with your lender, with your attorney, working with a CDFA like Lisa. Having a collective team in your corner is what's going to really help to smooth out the process and eliminate these certain, obstacles and hurdles and mistakes that we see people make every day. Number three, working with a certified divorce lending professional like myself. Depending on where you are in the country, you can go to divorcemortgagetraining.com/directory. And that's you'll be able to search from all over the country of lenders like myself that have taken the time to go through the certification course and taking the test and the ongoing, every year, the ongoing continuing education courses that we have to take to know all the different ins and outs. And these are just a few things that I pointed out today, but there are so many different things behind the scenes with divorce lending that's very important to understand, that working with just a very general type of lender, they're not typically going to know all these if they're not dealing with divorce scenarios all the time. So it's very similar to, going to a doctor, somebody that's a general practitioner. You're likely not going to want to go to a general practitioner if you need to go and have open heart surgery. So it's very much the same here, working with somebody, either myself or another CDLP, wherever you are in the country. And if I can help you further, I'm licensed here in Georgia, Alabama, Florida, and Colorado. You can schedule a free consultation with me at www.calendly.com/Tony-Scarparo. And I'd love to, have a conversation with you. A lot of times I'm having conversations with clients that could be 6 to 12 months before we actually end up going through a transaction of a refinance or purchasing that next home. But having those conversations way, way in advance is going to help you eliminate and avoid these mistakes and pitfalls that we see people make every day.
I couldn't agree more. And we are so grateful to have professionals like Mike and Tony and Pam here who know the ins and outs of divorce and their specialty area, because this is not a time you want to do this alone, folks. I can't tell you how many times people have come to me with these kinds of problems that Tony just went through. And they could have been avoided had they been directed, had somebody been looking at this prior to the divorce being finalized and early on in the process, because there's things that can be done to work on your credit, to structure the payments of your support for their term and their time, their amount, so that you can qualify, so that both spouses can move on by separating the properties and doing what needs to be done in the proper way. And that's why we're here doing this today. Tony, great information. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa.
Thank you. And next up, we have Pam. And Pam, welcome to the webinar. And Pam Evans is an associate broker and marketing pro with Century 21 Results. And I will tell you, she's an incredible marketing pro. She knows for many people, their home is their biggest asset. She helps people get the highest possible market price. And for those also looking for a new home, Pam can make the whole process seamless. Real estate and marketing are her passions. Her job, which she takes very seriously and with great joy, is to help her clients' transactions flow smoothly and successfully. Don't we all want that when we're buying or selling a home? Whether you are buying, selling, investing, or finding yourself in a distressed situation, she can help you maximize your results. Pam, welcome. It's so wonderful to have you here today. And is your mic on? Are we hearing you?
Turn audio on. Do I turn my screen sharing?
You're good. We hear you now. Okay. All right. So there we go. We're going to let you take it from here, and then we're going to come back after and answer some of these questions. Folks, I'm sorry if we go over a few moments. If you can't hang around, we understand, but we will be sending out the recording of this tomorrow. So feel free to check back if you have to step out. We understand. All right, Pam, take it from here.
Well, I appreciate it, and I'll be brief. But most importantly, if you are going through a divorce, it is absolutely imperative to work with a good realtor who will help you think objectively, not emotionally, and will most importantly help you sell your home for the highest possible price with the least amount of stress, because you are going to need those proceeds from the sale. So you don't want to make emotional mistakes. So working with a neutral, objective party is key. The selling and moving anyway is stressful enough. So if you overlay a divorce situation on top of that, it's really a double whammy. So it's important for the realtor you choose to be very adaptable to the situation, because every situation will have different requirements and different people involved. For example, Larry and Teresa, this is a couple that I helped a few years ago. I've changed people's names. They were no longer living together. They were no longer speaking, but they were both on title. Larry was the one that hired me and asked for my guidance and how to fix up the home to get it market ready. Teresa didn't want any part of that, but we needed her on all documents as a signer, because she was the owner as well, selling the property. So it was understanding those circumstances up front, getting in touch with Teresa, introducing myself, assuring her that even though Larry had hired me, I was there to represent both of their interests, and I was going to be very equitable and fair, and I was a neutral party. They weren't speaking with each other. So that can complicate things, especially when you're in a negotiation with a buyer and one party is willing to give something and the other is not, and how to make them feel that you're not trying to take sides against them. We also set up closing in this circumstance where they closed separately. She came in first, and an hour later he came in. So there are all kinds of ways to minimize the stress but maximize the results. And we had a very successful transaction, and now they have each moved on in their life, and they never spoke to each other. Then there's a situation with Keith and Jackie. They are on speaking terms. One of them wants the divorce and one of them does not and is heartbroken. So that's very difficult. I had helped them purchase this house. They have 2 young kids. So this is a very emotional situation. I adore both of them. And I have made it clear to both of them that I genuinely care for each one of them, but I'm going to make sure that they are both able to get out of this transaction and move on. We did investigate finding out if they could hold on to the house. One or the other could afford it. Neither could afford the house as a single party. So unfortunately, they love the house, don't really want to sell, but they have to sell. So just putting together a scenario where you do most of the communicating between the 2 of them, try to have it so it's an amicable discussion about everything. And we have not yet closed. We're scheduled to do that shortly. But we're able to get them to each move on so they can work with somebody like Tony to rebuild and get back into real estate and come out unharmed. Next. So why selecting the right realtor is really key. You need a professional to help you think rationally, not emotionally. This is a very emotional circumstance, and it's my job to always think about what will yield the best result and what's in the best interest of each client, and who understands the financial implications. You're going to need these funds. So we can't leave any money on the table, and we can't make angry or emotional decisions. And I want to minimize stress. Somebody who understands and empathizes with your individual situation. Everybody's situation is a little bit different. This is your financial future. What to look for? You should definitely talk to some realtors. You should ask for recommendations. I have done a number of divorce circumstances, starting with my own. You want to have good communication skills. The realtor you choose needs to be polished and professional when dealing with both parties who are not necessarily amicable, such as the situation with Larry and Teresa. You want somebody business savvy, but emotionally connected and empathizing with your circumstance, but maintaining a clear head. And obviously good local market knowledge and strong marketing skills, because the objective is to sell successfully for the highest possible price. So obviously somebody experienced also within divorce situations. And that is basically it in a nutshell. I didn't want to run over because I would like to allow questions for everybody, because those were great presentations from Mike and Tony.
And great presentation from you too as well, Pam. I will tell you, I just want to mention here that the marketing piece of this is so incredibly important. You know, curb appeal, just some little tweaks. I was at one point trying to sell my home, and Pam came in and took a look at a few things and made some suggestions, and snap, it sold after, not long after. So those things are vitally important, and you want to work with people who have the experience to get you what you need. So at this point, I'm going to let Marcella bring herself on, and if the other speakers want to come back on video as well, and we will let you go through this. And I do want to say, you are dealing with top-notch professionals here. I have worked with all of these folks either personally and or with clients, through clients, and rave reviews. So if you need help in any of these areas and you are local, or they can help you find someone where you are, please reach out. You're going to get good customer service, and they know their stuff. As you can see, I even learned some new things today, and I love that. All right, so Marcella, take it away.
All right, so we do have one question that Mike might be able to help us with. We had an attendee ask, is the appraisal methodology basically the same for a mortgage appraisal as the one used for divorce, or are there differences?
The similarities are between mortgage appraisals and appraisals for divorce. The sales comparison and the cost approach and the income approach would all be considered, and maybe one or more of those would be utilized. The differences would come in comparable selection, because in a divorce situation, I'm governed by state appraisal law and the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice guidelines as far as comparable selection and report writing, where in a mortgage appraisal, you'd be governed by those plus Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac standards, and or maybe FHA standards or VA standards, and or any lender guidelines, which are an overlay on top of everything else. So I hope that answers the question. I mean,
I
It
have
does.
for you, Mike. Marcella, before you go, I've always wondered, when you're purchasing a home or versus when you're refining or whether you're getting a divorce, sometimes when they know the mortgage amount, the appraisal goes right to the mortgage amount, not a dollar over. Is there a reason for that? I've always wondered.
This is probably more common on purchases. Sometimes you'll have some appraisers that look as the contract as a number to hit. It should, in any situation, a piece of property needs to be appraised for what it's worth.
That's what
I've seen different situations where I've seen, some appraisers come in like $2,000 under a $250,000 home, versus the contract price. That's pretty close in my books, and I would be, if there were sales to support that contract price, I'd be willing to appraise it at the 250 amount versus the 248. I do not in any way pretend I'm that good to say the house is really worth 248 or 250. Especially if there's a contract on it and there's other sales that support it. But I've seen other situations where there's a huge discrepancy between the appraised value and the contract. I just seen one in technical review I was doing for a lender. There's about $60,000 difference, and quite frankly, the property was way overpriced. It was a for sale by owner. There was no real estate agents involved. It was a resort area in a rural part of another state. And I think somebody just put a number up there and they found a buyer. And unfortunately, the definition of market value is that you need to have an informed buyer and seller both acting in their best judgment in that. And typically when you have for sale by owner and there's no agents involved, sometimes the buyers and sellers are not the best informed they could be.
Very good. Thank you for answering that. Okay, Marcella, what's our next question?
The only attendee question we had. One thing I thought was interesting was the way that with an unbiased appraisal done by an actual certified appraiser, how that would benefit the parties, and then having an actual person like Tony who knows divorce telling you what you can and can't afford and helping you understand that, and having someone like Pam to actually find that property. That all of those things are like, they're kind of pieces to a puzzle. I don't think you can really get divorced without one of these pieces. I think this is super, super important that sometimes people don't really understand. So thank you guys. Pam, I wanted to ask you, what is your area, and what area do you cover? For those of us that are on here today that could use your services, and then so that they would be able to find you.
Well, I appreciate you asking. I can help you find a good realtor in any part of the country because I'm a member of the Women's Council of Realtors, which is an international network, and people who, not just women, but belong to it are professional, good realtors. And I have done that for a number of friends who are relocating. So if you need a good realtor anywhere, I can find that for you. If you're interested in speaking with me, my area is Metro Atlanta.
If you want to put your contact info in the chat boxes, guys, feel free, so that folks can get that. And Marcel, I think your camera's frozen, so we hear you talking, but you're kind of frozen in time, but that's okay.
I'm going to put everybody's information up. It's just so everyone knows. You can go directly to DivorceTown USA, and every single person that you see here, you can find there. So you can go into DivorceTown USA. You can schedule an appointment right on Tony's calendar from there. You can find Mike, you can find Pam, and you can reach out to you can find Lisa and reach out to any of them that way.
Yep, we're there. We're here to help. And we wish everyone the best, whatever your situation is going on in your life, whether you're thinking about getting divorced. And that's the best time to approach any of us, because you can formulate a plan informed. It's a much better way to go through things in life when you have the information that you need to make better decisions down the line. If you're in the midst of divorce, definitely reach out, because there's still time to prevent common costly mistakes. And if you're post-divorce and you're dealing with matters, we can help too. So thank you for joining us today, and we'll look to see you next month. And also, you can find all of us and many more professionals that are here to help you at DivorceTownUSA.com. Thank you all for joining me today. These are great folks, great information, guys. You know, Tony, I have one more question I forgot. I had written this down. You mentioned that there has to be at least 36 months of support for it to be calculated in the numbers for someone to qualify to refi or purchase a new home. But I often, when I'm doing this, add another 6 months, because I have run into situations, if you're only using 36 months and somebody doesn't apply right away, they take a month or two after the divorce, now they're at 34 or 35 months and they've cut themselves short. So I usually say 42 months minimum if we're looking at a situation where someone needs child support or alimony to qualify. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would really say even 42 months is going to be cutting it really, really close, because in most scenarios, we're going to need to show proof that they've actually been receiving it for 6 months.
Oh.
So if we're at that point of showing 6 months receipt, but they've only done it for 42 months, they're going to be you have to time it perfectly for that to work. So really 48 months and beyond is going to be ideal, so that you don't run into a timing issue of getting them qualified.
Great. I'm so glad I asked that question. It has not come up that that's been a problem, but I hadn't considered what you're saying here. So we all learn something new every day. And this is why the team approach is best. This is what we do at DivorceTown in action. Thank you all again. Great.
Thank you. You're always great.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Have a good one. And thank you all for joining me. Everyone's come from different places in the country today, and I appreciate you being here. Bye-bye.